not me. Okay. Run faster. That's the boy. Shit.
Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today we're going to be talking about repairing in Star Citizen and how some of you might end up doing this as an in-game career. The information that we got through the design article, which I'll link in the description, was very informative, and like with mining, it turned out to be something I'm now actually pretty interested in, which before I wouldn't have even really envisioned this being fun. Repairing in the simplest form can be looked at as swapping out components of a ship that have sustained damage. If damage is done to the hull of a ship and that's severe enough, it's going to pass that damage through to the components below it, and then potentially to the subcomponents that are then connected to that. To make sense of all of this, think of avionics as a component, and then whatever you add to that component to make it perform better would then be considered a subcomponent. We get information on the different types of subcomponents that'll be in game, and they range in their purposes from power conduits, which are going to allow you to use less power consumption, insulators to protect components from electromagnetic radiation, and heat sinks to kind of lower the infrared signature in the ship. There's a bunch of others on the image on the screen right now, and if you want to read through all of them, go ahead. But that kind of gives you an idea of what these actually do when we start talking about subcomponents. So you just get done in a firefight, and you're there sitting there licking your wounds. But if you want to get back up to full operational speed, you need to do some repairs. In larger multi-cruise ships, you're going to have different hatches to the module racks on the interior of the ship to work on. Like with the Constellation, they're on the port side of the cargo area. But in a smaller single-seat craft, most of these are going to be housed along the hull on the outside of the ship, meaning that you may actually need to land or EVA out to do field repairs, which actually sounds fun and nerve-wracking at the same time. Oh, and it's important to know that to make these repairs, you actually need to kill power to these components. Otherwise, you could get electrocuted and use one of your spaceman's lives. In very large ships, you may end up being able to utilize computers to reroute power kind of away from where you're working instead of cutting the power altogether. But when it comes time to make these repairs, it's a simple process of removing the old part and replacing it with a new one, if you happen to have one. If we're just talking about a subcomponent, you should be able to get away with just removing it because they seem to really only be there to increase performance in some way. But if you have the spare, it's better to get it from storage and get it back to the max. I'm kind of reading into that a little bit, like saying that you can operate without a subcomponent, but that may end up not being the case. There is a certain universal nature to the components on ships though, as long as they're in the same size class. So a coolant rod is a coolant rod if they are the same size, regardless if you pull it out of the laser of a Gladius and you end up needing to put it into the shield generator of a Hornet. I think in a more likely situation in field repairs, I think it would actually be more along the lines of pulling out an EM insulator from the weapons, on like a Constellation, and then moving that into the shields or avionics, thus keeping your most important systems up and running. Either way, don't expect a rod from a reclaimer to fit into your Aurora. In the largest of ships, there's full backup systems that are going to allow you to actually utilize computers to just divert that power. So if you can't replace the primary in time, you have a backup you can then switch it to. Ships like the Vanguard and the Sabre, where redundancy was the selling point, should also benefit from that type of action in the future too. So that's the small scale, the quick and dirty, the plug-and-play versions of what you can expect from repairs. But it gets much more involved for things like repairing hull damage. After all, you don't just tape a piece of cardboard over
for several years now. When we say it's early days